Some moments in congressional hearings change everything. The 28th of April, 2025 was one of those days. When Congressman Seth Magaziner stood up in the House Homeland Security Committee hearing, he wasn't just asking routine oversight questions. He was about to expose the most heartbreaking abuse of power in Department of Homeland Security history. What happened next wasn't just political theater. It was the systematic destruction of a cabinet secretary who had forgotten that her job was protecting Americans, not deporting them. The hearing had been routine until Magaziner's turn to question Secretary Kristi Noem. Other committee members had focused on budget items, policy implementations, and standard bureaucratic concerns. But Magaziner had come prepared with something different. He had documents, attorney statements, and most damaging of all, he had the story of a 4-year-old American citizen with stage 4 cancer who had been deported by NOEM'S DHS. Madam Secretary, on the 24th of April, a woman in Louisiana was deported along with her 7-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son, both of whom were U.S. citizens. Magaziner began, his voice steady but carrying an edge that immediately captured the room's attention. The 4-year-old son had stage 4 cancer. The words hung in the air like a physical blow in the gallery. Reporters stopped typing. Committee members looked up from their phones. Even the usually distracted C-SPAN cameras seemed to focus more intently. But Magaziner wasn't finished. He had come armed with evidence that would demolish every defense Noem might attempt. Now, you just stated under oath that the mother consented to having her U.S. citizen children removed. But I have spoken with the attorney for that U.S. citizen child with stage 4 cancer. She has also made numerous statements to the press in which she stated unequivocally that at no time did the mother consent to her U.S. citizen children being removed. The trap was set perfectly. Noem had just testified under oath that the deportation was consensual. Magaziner had documentation proving it wasn't. In congressional hearings, this kind of contradiction doesn't just damage credibility, it suggests perjury. What evidence do you have to support your claim that she did consent? Magaziner demanded. Noem's response revealed everything Americans needed to know about how DHS operated under her leadership. Congressman, we follow the same policies and procedures, she began, offering bureaucratic jargon instead of evidence. But Magaziner wasn't going to let her hide behind talking points. What evidence do you have? What documentation do you have that that mother consented? We'll get that to you, sir. I don't have it with me, Noem replied. The admission was devastating. A cabinet secretary, testifying under oath about the deportation of American citizen children, couldn't provide basic documentation to support her claims. She was either lying about having evidence, or she had ordered the deportation without proper documentation. Either way, she had been caught. Magaziner's response was clinical and crushing. Please do. I understand it is hard to keep them all straight because you deported multiple U.S. citizen children. But I am asking specifically about the 4-year-old with cancer who was deported on the 25th of April. The phrase multiple U.S. citizen children hung in the air like an accusation. This wasn't an isolated incident, this was a pattern. But the cruelty went deeper than just the deportation itself. For the record, that family was also not given access to legal counsel before they were deported, even though their lawyer was in the same building at the time. Magaziner continued. The detail was devastating in its specificity. A 4-year-old cancer patient was being deported without legal representation, and his attorney was literally in the same building, blocked from helping by DHS agents. Magaziner then pulled out his most powerful weapon, federal policy that Noem's agents had violated. I am holding in my hands here a document called ICE Directive 11064, Interests of Non-Citizen Parents and Legal Guardians of Minor Children. This is the policy for how ICE agents should handle situations like this. He wasn't just accusing DHS of cruelty. He was documenting their violation of their own official procedures. The directive was clear and unambiguous. It states unequivocally that parents and legal guardians should have the ability to make alternative care arrangements for minor children prior to their arrest or detention, and that ICE must afford parents the opportunity to consult with legal counsel. Every word of this policy had been violated in the case of the 4-year-old cancer patient. Magaziner's question cut to the heart of the accountability issue. So, did the ICE agents working on this case who deported this 4 year-old with cancer of their own volition fail to follow ICE policies, or were they directed to by your office or anyone else in DHS leadership? The question was brilliant. Either NOEM had lost control of her department, or she had personally ordered the violation of federal policy. There was no good answer. NOEM tried to deflect. Sir, this mother chose to keep her child with, but Magaziner cut her off. You have not produced any evidence to say so. But I am asking again, have you directed DHS officers to? He was trying to get her to admit personal responsibility for policy violations, but NOEM kept deflecting with meaningless talking points about how her policies were different from the previous administration. Frustrated with her evasions, Magaziner pivoted to expose the systematic nature of the abuse. On the 15th of March, your department sent 3 airplanes to El Salvador. Those planes carried approximately 261 individuals who were imprisoned upon arrival. Did you personally review and approve the names of those 261 individuals before they were sent? The question was devastating in its implications. As DHS Secretary, reviewing deportation lists should be standard procedure, especially for mass deportations to countries where deportees would be imprisoned. But NOEM's response revealed the shocking negligence with which she approached her responsibilities. Sir, we have deported and sent home. She began, but Magaziner pressed for a direct answer. Have you? Did you review the names of those individuals? When she continued to evade, he demanded clarity. Are you aware of whether those 261 individuals were given the opportunity to speak with a lawyer or appear before a judge before they were put on those planes? Yes or no? Sir, every single individual followed the exact same process, NOEM replied, which wasn't an answer. Magaziner's response was definitive. They were not. They were not all given the opportunity to appear before a judge or speak with a lawyer. She had just admitted to mass deportations without due process. But the legal violations went deeper than administrative negligence. On the 7th of April, the Supreme Court ruled that detainees must have an opportunity to have a hearing before they are deported. Are you familiar with the 7th of April Supreme Court ruling? Magaziner asked. When NOEM gave a vague affirmative response, he demanded, can you assure us that in the future you will abide by that Supreme Court ruling to provide detainees with a hearing before they are deported? NOEM's answer, we're following all judges' orders, was immediately contradicted by the evidence Magaziner had just presented. She was claiming to follow court orders while simultaneously defending deportations that violated those very orders. Then Magaziner introduced the case that would become the symbol of everything wrong with NOEM's DHS, Andre Hernandez Romero. I have a photograph here of Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay makeup artist from Venezuela. He fled Venezuela fearing gang violence because of his opposition to the Maduro dictatorship and his sexual orientation. The case was perfect for exposing the arbitrary cruelty of NOEM's policies. He presented himself at a port of entry and requested asylum. His claim was found to be credible, and he was placed in detention to await a full hearing. But he never received a full hearing because you put him on one of those planes to El Salvador, where he still is today. Romero had followed every legal procedure correctly. He hadn't entered illegally. He had presented himself at an official port of entry. His asylum claim had been found credible by immigration officials, and he had been deported anyway. Listen to me, Magaziner continued, his voice rising with controlled anger. He had no criminal record in the United States or in any other country. He did not even enter the country illegally. He presented at a port of entry. He tried to do it the legal way. But the most damning detail was yet to come. And to this date, the only evidence your department has presented to justify his imprisonment is that he had 2 tattoos, one that said Mom and one that said Dad. The absurdity was breathtaking. A man's life had been destroyed, his asylum claim denied, and his freedom eliminated because he had tattoos honoring his parents. Do you have any other evidence to present for why this individual should be locked up in El Salvador? Magaziner demanded. NOEM's response revealed the bankruptcy of her department's decision-making, sir. Every case uses the same protocols and the same processes and input. She couldn't provide any additional evidence because there wasn't any. Magaziner pressed harder. Do you have any evidence other than the tattoos that say Mom or Dad for why this individual should be locked up? NOEM tried to claim there were communications and affiliations, but she couldn't provide specifics. You have not presented any other evidence, Magaziner stated flatly, cutting off her evasive response. The contrast was stark and morally devastating. While DHS was deporting gay asylum seekers for having tattoos honoring their parents, violent criminals were walking free, while 4-year-old cancer patients were being separated from their attorneys. Actual threats to public safety were being ignored. Magaziner's closing statement was a masterpiece of moral clarity and political devastation. During your confirmation hearing, you said your focus would be on deporting immigrants who have been convicted of crimes and those who have received removal orders. But that is not what you have been doing. The indictment was comprehensive and undeniable. Instead, you have been deporting children with cancer. Children who are U.S. citizens, a gay makeup artist who committed no crime and didn't even enter the country illegally. Every example was chosen for maximum moral impact. Sick children, American citizens, legal asylum seekers. You have been sloppy. Your department has been sloppy. Magaziner continued, his voice carrying the weight of documented evidence, and instead of focusing on real criminals, you have allowed innocent children to be deported. The word sloppy was particularly damaging coming in an official congressional hearing. It suggested not just policy disagreement, but basic competence failure. But Magaziner saved his most personal and devastating attack for last. While you fly around the country playing dress up for the cameras, instead of enforcing the laws, you have repeatedly broken them. You need to change course immediately before more innocent people are hurt on your watch. The phrase playing dress up for the cameras was brutally effective political rhetoric. It painted Noem as vain and superficial, more concerned with her public image than her actual responsibilities. While she was staging photo opportunities, American children were being deported and legal asylum seekers were being imprisoned for having tattoos. The aftermath of Magaziner's demolition was immediate and devastating. Within hours, number cancer child deported was trending on social media. The image of a 4-year-old American citizen with cancer being separated from his attorney became the symbol of everything wrong with NOEM'S DHS. The tattoos saying, "Mom and Dad" became a meme representing the absurd cruelty of her deportation policies. But more than social media outrage, Magaziner had accomplished something more fundamental. He had used documented evidence, official policies, and Supreme Court rulings to demonstrate that DHS under NOEM wasn't just implementing harsh policies. It was systematically violating the law, ignoring court orders, and targeting the most vulnerable people in American society. The cancer child case became the defining moment of Noem's tenure as DHS secretary. It crystallized everything critics had been saying about her department's priorities and methods. Instead of focusing on violent criminals and genuine threats to public safety, DHS was targeting sick children, legal asylum seekers, and American citizens. Medical professionals were horrified by the implications of deporting a child during cancer treatment. Interrupting stage 4 cancer therapy can be fatal, and forcing a 4-year-old to continue treatment in a foreign country without proper medical records or family support is essentially a death sentence disguised as immigration enforcement. Legal experts were equally disturbed by the procedural violations Magaziner had documented: the blocking of legal counsel, the violation of ICE Directive 11,064, and the mass deportations without hearings all represented fundamental breakdowns in due process that courts had spent decades establishing. The Venezuelan makeup artist case became equally symbolic. Andre Hernandez Romero represented everything that was supposed to be good about the American asylum system. He had fled genuine persecution, followed all legal procedures, and presented himself for official processing. His detention and deportation based on tattoos, honoring his parents, showed how far DHS had strayed from its mission of protecting legitimate asylum seekers while targeting actual threats. Magaziner's evidence-based approach set a new standard for congressional oversight. Instead of grandstanding with rhetoric, he had brought documentation, policy directives, attorney statements, and Supreme Court rulings. He had made it impossible for Noem to dismiss his accusations as political theater because everything was documented and verifiable. The hearing also exposed the broader pattern of accountability failure within DHS. Noem couldn't provide evidence for her claims, didn't know whether deportees had received hearings, and couldn't explain why official policies were being violated. The picture that emerged was of a department operating without proper oversight, documentation, or legal compliance. Congress members from both parties began demanding investigations into DHS deportation practices. The revelation that multiple American citizen children had been deported raised questions about how many similar cases existed that hadn't received public attention. The mass deportation of 261 people, without individual review, suggested systematic disregard for due process rights. But perhaps most damaging was the revelation of NOEM'S personal priorities. While she was playing dress-up for the cameras, as Magaziner put it, children with cancer were being separated from their attorneys, and legal asylum seekers were being imprisoned for having tattoos. The contrast between her public image cultivation and the human cost of her policies became the defining narrative of her tenure. Magaziner's methodical destruction of NOEM'S credibility demonstrated the power of preparation, documentation, and moral clarity in congressional oversight. He had taken complex policy issues and distilled them into human stories that every American could understand. A sick child denied legal help, a legal immigrant imprisoned for honoring his parents, and a cabinet secretary who couldn't explain her own decisions. The 4-year-old with cancer became more than a policy debate. He became the symbol of what happens when government power is exercised without accountability, compassion, or basic human decency. Magaziner had proven that the most powerful weapon against government abuse isn't rhetoric or politics. It is evidence, empathy, and the courage to demand answers when children's lives are at stake.